What's up, Weirdo Swarm, and welcome back to what is sure to be another fantastic episode of Podagon Infinity. Of course, this is the podcast that opens the door to all things King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. Thank you so much for joining us once again, or if you are here for the first time, welcome. We hope you stay a while and hang out with us for this whole episode, and if you have a good time here, please consider checking out our other episodes as well so you can see what we had to say about all the other albums that we've covered so far. If you are as big of a fan of this band as we are, then we're sure you're going to enjoy your time with us and not regret it. By the way, I am just one half of this show, and my name is Joe.
And I'm the other half of this show, and my name is Spencer, and I want to echo what you just said, Joe. We thank you for listening and following along with us if you've been with us for some time now, and also like you said, Joe, likewise, if you're very new to the show here, we thank you for joining us, and we're glad that you discovered us, and we hope that you enjoy the ride.
So, on this episode today, we are covering the first of the Microtonal Gizz albums, the classic 2017 Flying Microtonal Banana, and we are so excited to talk about this one today. This album is unique and special for a lot of ways, but before we get into it, we have some listener messages to read, so Spencer, why don't you start that off for us?
Yeah, these listener messages actually all came from one person this week. This is from Jeremy C., who emailed us. And his first email is a little bit long, so we will summarize a bit for brevity, but he talks about currently at our Butterfly 3000 episode at the time that we received this message, and it's reinvigorating his love for some of the albums that he listens to less. So glad that we're reaching him in that way. He got into King Gizz in 2019 and talks about how at his age, he says he's 45, you have to kind of force yourself to stay out of a rut. I can definitely agree with that at age 32 as well. I have to work hard to stay out of a musical rut also. But he ran into Infest the Rat's Nest, and as a metalhead, he was totally hooked. KG came out, though, and, quote, at that point I was thrown. What the hell was my first thought? But I listened to the whole thing and was just flabbergasted. After that, I had to listen to the back catalog, close quote. So just kind of cherry picking. Jeremy came into this band at a really interesting time during that 2019 stretch run, 2019-2020, of course, once the Microtonal saga resumed. But he expresses his gratefulness for the pod. He's really enjoying it. He said it's great listening with intelligent analysis and tidbits of info he doesn't have. He shared a couple of bits of media with us also. The first is a picture of his son getting his ticket for Christmas last year, which is so cool. What a great job, Jeremy. That was a great choice. His son had just asked to start seeing concerts, and it was hard not to tell him that they had already bought him a ticket, and the other is of two of them at the show later on. So firmly entrenched in the Weirdo Swarm. Great to hear, Jeremy. He also adds in a separate email, during our Infest the Rat's Nest album, we talked about how the end of hell was so different, and we wanted more of that. Jeremy says, I've always looked at that as a tease for the next album, KG. If I'm not mistaken, they're using quarter tones, I'm pretty sure by using bending like in Painted Black by the Rolling Stones. I've never heard of that, but that's an interesting, astute observation. That ever strike a chord with you, Joe?
No, that is news to me. I'd have to, I've been meaning to go back and listen to it again and dig into that a little bit to see if he's onto something there, but interesting either way. And in one final message that we received from Jeremy, he said, I really enjoyed your bracket album cover show. It was fun and made me look at the covers again a lot more closely. I wanted to point out something that I think you guys probably missed because you use Spotify. I'm pretty positive that the guys were inspired by the Apple Music curated heavy metal playlist. It's called Optimus Metallum, and the cover art for that playlist is eerily similar to Omnium Gatherum. He included a screenshot of that in the email, and I couldn't agree more. It is actually weirdly coincidental, or maybe it was an inspiration. I don't know how long Apple Music has been using this imagery for this playlist, but go ahead and look that up if you don't use Apple Music. That was really interesting to see. So thanks for that little tidbit of info there. That is really interesting. And he just ended the email with, anyways, keep it up, guys. You've made work a lot more enjoyable for the last few days. That's really sweet to hear. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for listening. Glad you're enjoying the show. Glad you're enjoying your journey through the band's discography. And, as someone that listens to podcasts all day to get through my work day as well, I could totally understand that feeling. So I'm so glad that we could do that for you, man. That That means a lot. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for listening, Jeremy. And if you want to send us an email or a DM, you can do so on any of our platforms. We are at Podagon Infinity on the big three socials, and you can email us at podagoninfinity@gmail.com.
Yeah, and outside of just your experiences with the band or questions for us, feel free to also submit show subject matter, show ideas, because, we love covering the albums like this, but we really do want to do a lot more fun, just kind of out of the norm episodes like that album cover bracket that we did. That was a lot of fun, and it was a little thing to break up the normal album discussion. So if you got any fun ideas for stuff we could do within that realm of something like that, let us know, because we need content.
Certainly. We do have a couple of ideas brewing in our brains here, a couple of things maybe in the pipeline, but we absolutely would welcome any further ideas and feedback from you all.
All right, so with that top of the show stuff out of the way, let's get into this album, man. Like I said, this was one of the 5 releases from 2017. In fact, it was the first album released that year, coming out on February 24th, 2017. We already covered the final album of that year, which was Gumboot Soup, so now we're taking a little step back earlier in 2017 to talk about this one. And this album is really special because it marks the band's first full album foray into microtonal music.
Yeah, this, believe it or not, was originally supposed to be a Turkish folk album based around the instrument the bağlama, but the band eventually deemed that it was too difficult. The bağlama, who, for those who are unfamiliar, it's a stringed instrument similar to the guitar, but the body of the instrument is a little more pear-shaped, and I believe typically the back of it is more rounded rather than being kind of a straight edge to it like most guitars are. But yeah, the band eventually, I guess, deemed at some point that was going to be a little bit too tough of an undertaking, so they shifted course a little bit, and they gave us quite the interesting album nonetheless. Joe, I don't know about you, but looking back at where this fell in the discography in terms of studio album number that this fell at, this was studio album number 9. The band was still relatively young in 2017 at this point. Like, you think Podagon Infinity came out just the year prior. Mindfuzz was only 3 years old. This album feels like it's newer, to me at least. What do you think? Yeah,
no, for sure. It feels way more ahead of its time within the grand scheme of their discography. It's actually kind of insane to think that Podagon was the last album that had come out just before this one. They are so different, and Flying Microtonal Banana just really feels like an evolution in the band's history of them taking this big leap to do something very different, very, very unique, very special. It is just, it's crazy to see how everything lines up time-wise like that.
Definitely, and despite this being such a unique album and such a different direction in their discography at the time, this was the first album by the band to chart on the US Billboard 200. It peaked at number 170, which is not Taylor Swift territory, mind you, but for something that was so perceptibly left of center at the time, really cool they were able to push it that far up the charts.
That's insane. If you were to ask me what I think their first charting album was, this would not be the one that I would have guessed. So cool little tidbit of info there. I did not come across that in my research.
Speaking of research, this was such an interesting album to dig into, research and prep-wise for me, and I'm sure you would agree, Joe, in many ways. There are so many different world influences from a variety of countries where Stu and the band borrow different tones and themes and instruments from other countries. We mentioned the Turkish folk album that was the original idea for this album. It sort of grew into what it was with the microtonal instruments, which are used in a variety of countries, a lot of them in the sort of the Middle East, the Eastern Mediterranean area. Something very new and different for Western ears. I remember that shortly after the time you got me into the band, I ended up listening to KG and LW actually before this album, and that was my first introduction to some of the microtonal instruments. And I sort of went just like, whoa, this is just so different and strange.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be insensitive by saying strange, but this is not something you hear in Western music very much. Microtones are much more common in the Eastern Hemisphere.
Yeah, and speaking of that, I actually have a little kind of description for everybody here to try to explain what microtonal music really is, because it might be a brand new thing to a lot of people. And, obviously, if you're listening to this, you're familiar with this album and probably with the other microtonal experimentation that the band has done. But, in case you don't know exactly what it even is that they're doing, I want to try to explain this a little bit based on some research that I did. I am a musician, but I'm not an expert with this kind of stuff. But basically, it is microtonal music is music that applies the use of microtones, funnily enough, which are frequency intervals that are smaller than a semitone. So, like Spencer said, this is more commonly used in a lot of Eastern music, a lot of folk music in like the Middle East, a lot of countries and cultures in that area. So a semitone is like what you would typically see on a piano or a guitar. It's like, each next key on a piano or each next fret on a guitar is a difference of one semitone. That's like how much of a frequency jump it is from one note to the next. But there are frequencies that exist between those notes. So you could bend a string slightly on a normal guitar and hear that microtone that exists between the two frets. But there exist guitars with special frets that allow those microtone notes to be played more easily without having to attempt to perfectly bend a note just right to get to that frequency. So that's exactly what the boys did here. They hooked themselves up with some funky microtonal guitars and made this album, Flying Microtonal Banana, which is actually what they call Stu's wild, bright yellow microtonal electric guitar that he has. It's a really crazy, I forget the name of the model off the top of my head, but it is this insane, weird looking neon yellow guitar, and that's what they call that guitar, and therefore they named the whole album Flying Microtonal Banana.
Yeah, and as you can see on the Jason Galea created album artwork, which is dominated by yellow and blue and black, the guitar that sort of like costumed figure is holding, that is the aforementioned microtonal banana guitar that Stu uses. It's got that yellow headstock with the yellow body. It kind of evokes the shape of a peeled banana with the loose peels sort of hanging down. I love the unique shape and look of that. And I remember my first sort of visual cues sort of matching up the sounds with the appearance of a microtonal instrument was seeing either a picture or a video of Stu playing this guitar on tour somewhere, and you can see that there are so many more frets than you would see on a normal guitar, quote-unquote normal guitar, what we see more commonly here in the West. There are so many more frets that, as Joe was talking about, that allow the guitarist access to those sort of between notes, those half notes, those quarter notes that are not generally present in Western music, and it produces some sick sounds.
It certainly does, and that was just my brief introduction to what microtonal music is, but I wanted to let everyone know, if you want to learn more about this stuff and kind of the music theory around microtonality, I highly suggest checking out the YouTube video called Microtonality in Western Music by David Bennett Piano. This video was a huge help in getting me to better wrap my head around the subject, and he actually makes mention of King Gizz and this album in particular in that video as well. He has all kinds of fascinating videos covering all sorts of subjects within the world of music and music theory, and he's actually brought Gizz up a few times. He even has a video completely dedicated to ice death planets, lungs, mushrooms, and lava, which is really fascinating. I think the guy's videos are really interesting. I've been watching him for a little while, so I highly suggest you check him out. Again, that's David Bennett Piano on YouTube.
One more video source I want to quickly mention here. We shared some time ago through the Podagon Infinity Instagram on our story the work of Turkish musician Tolgahan Çolu. We'll put his name and some of his information in the show notes or on a post later on here. But he's also a music professor over there in Turkey, and he just came up with this concept of putting together this Flying Microtonal Banana scorebook where he sort of dissects the chords used in each song, and he made this whole little booklet out of the tabs and things for fellow musicians to follow along and sort of play along with. So we'll reshare that story again from him. I believe P Doom Records actually was selling that at one point. They're out of stock now, but some really cool stuff that I recommend you check out if you're interested.
Yeah, I almost thought about picking up that book from P Doom just for fun, but as someone that doesn't have a microtonal guitar, I don't think it would be as fun. So I don't know, maybe I'll have to look into experimenting with that in the future.
Definitely. So, Joe, are you ready to get into the track by track of this beauty?
Hell yeah, brother. Let's do this thing. Let's get into track 1. Of course, it's Rattlesnake.
A King Gizz favorite, both in its album form and in its live show form. This is a wildly popular and well-known track of the band, in fact, probably one of its best-known songs. This was the lead single off of Flying Microtonal Banana, and this makes an early impression with its unique microtones, A, and B, the fact that the title is sung 54 freaking times in the song. I know this track can be a little bit polarizing in terms of its repetition, but that actually serves an important purpose. Stu said in an interview that the repetition of the notes, the chords, and some of the lyrics helps get the listener familiar with the concept of microtones. So rather than sort of throwing this super proggy advanced track at you from the jump, Stu and the band decided, let's keep things simple with the first track that we dropped from this album and just sort of gradually introduce these Western listeners and those unfamiliar with microtones to this type of music, and I think that was a wise choice.
Yeah, and actually to add on to what you said about Stu, what Stu had to say about the song in an interview, Joey actually added on to this idea by saying, it's annoying at the start, but by the time you get to the end, or maybe listen a couple times, it's just in you and you can't escape it. And I couldn't agree more. It definitely can be a little, like, kind of can throw you off a little bit in the beginning, but it really does help bring the concept of microtonal music in a nice kind of easy to digest, repetitive, catchy way.
Definitely. I do have to call out the fact that when Stu sings "Rattles Me" at the end of each chunk of the chorus, I didn't know that he was saying "rattles me." I thought that he was singing once again "rattlesnake," but it's "rattlesnake, rattlesnake, rattlesnake, rattles me." Every fourth line is "rattles me," not "rattlesnake." For some reason, that's much more pronounced and much more clear in every live version that I've heard of this song, much more so than the album version.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just like the nature of how they're kind of singing it in this high, like falsetto voice that makes it harder to pick out, or just the way it's mixed. But I'm in the same boat. It took me a while to recognize that that's what they were actually saying at every fourth line, like that rattles me.
True to the stated effort of the band trying to keep this simple, there aren't a lot of new parts introduced in this song up until about halfway through the track. I will say that at a minute 30 seconds, you have that short keyboard riff, that do-do-do-do-do-do, that hints at the later lyric of rattle, rattle, rattle. That's about the only quote-unquote different part thrown at the listener in about the first half of the song. But about halfway through the track, approximately 3:55 into the song, there's that super microtonal sounding section that ends with rattling till you're dead. And it just, that section of the song to me, it is like where it amps up the microtonality. It gives the Western listener such a different feel and a different look after you've been hit with this repetition of rattlesnake, rattlesnake. The lyrics, fangs are ready for the strike, deadly razor sharp, goes on from there, etc., etc. That starts that really cool section of the, what I am just calling the extra microtonal sounding part of this song, and the instrumentation behind it, it gets me so hyped every time.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's probably my favorite section of the song, is the faster lyrics there. And like you said, for lack of a better description, the super microtonally sounding moment there on the song. And I love the other part that comes right after, the sweat drips out of every pore as I bite you more and more and more. And it's funny. It's got this goofy rhythm to it, and I just love it. I think that's a standout section of the song for me. But in general, we mentioned the song's repetitive and it's pretty simple. It's a good introduction to the album. I do feel that it does overstay its welcome just a little bit.
Sure.
It is actually the longest song on the album, coming in at over 7 minutes long. And I think, there's nothing wrong with having a cool, long opener, but I think this song, the subject matter and the simplicity of it doesn't really call for needing to be as long as it is. Either way, if I want to put this album on, I still start it from the top. I still listen to the whole thing, but it's a little long, I think.
I have similar thoughts on each angle that you just mentioned there. It overstays its welcome by a little bit. I think this could have been maybe a 5-minute track, maybe 5.5 minutes if you want to push a little bit. That said, aside from the repetitive choruses, I do like the imagery in the faster paced portions of the song that we mentioned, just describing the aggression and the menace of this rattlesnake that's waiting to pounce on its prey and inject its prey's veins with its venom. It's badass, it's scary, it's cool, and it paints a fun picture. You almost picture like you're in the desert somewhere, and you come across this rattlesnake that's gonna bite the shit out of you.
Yeah,
and I think the music and the lyrics evoke it so well.
I do love how the faster pace of the lyrics and the music in general in those sections does pretty well evoke the feeling of a rattlesnake coming after you to bite your ass and kill you. And I could definitely feel the anxiety and the stress in the music there. And I think just in general, this, a lot of times we have elements in Gizz songs that are representative of a bigger theme or meaning or something. But to be honest, reading into this one, this song I think is just about a rattlesnake. Like, for real, it's about a rattlesnake coming to kill you. And I don't see a lot of deeper meaning in it. There might be, maybe. I don't know if you have a different thought, Spencer, but, don't fear nothing. Snake is bluffing, whips his tail, sends you running is one of my favorite lyrics. And I think that's about it. That's all it means to me.
Right. I don't think the lyrics hint at anything deeper than a rattlesnake in itself, personally, either. A couple more musical moments that I do want to point out, though, that you get sort of in the second half of the song. 4 minutes, 42 seconds, the return of the zurna. We previously heard that on Podagon Infinity on the song Wah Wah. And that's a part of this whole grouping of instruments that appear on this album that are microtonal. It's not just the guitar. You get a microtonal bass. You get a microtonal harmonica from Ambrose, which you also hear in the song. It's mostly kind of a low drone on this track. But you hear that again throughout the album, and the aforementioned zurna. It all fits in to give it this Middle Eastern flair. And another little fun moment, around that same time as the zurna comes in, I think it's actually shortly after the zurna, you get the wah pedal on the guitar with some palm-muted strums. It's almost like this waka waka wow wow waka 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 wow. It's a really cool sound, and it adds an interesting texture to it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm ashamed with how long I conflated in my brain the melody for this song and the melody for the Bob-omb Battlefield music on Mario 64. Joe, you remember this, I'm sure. Because that Bob-omb Battlefield music, for those unfamiliar, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da-da. In my head, I would sing rattlesnake, 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 da-da-da-da-da-da, just sort of meshing the two together in my head before I became more familiar with this. But finally, I became more familiar with this song to where it stands on its own more easily in my mind. But that's just a funny little thing I wanted to throw out there that I finally overcame.
Yeah, we've we've brought that up and had a conversation about that, I think, more than once. And I'm very desperate to hear someone make a nice, clean mashup of Rattlesnake with Bob-omb Battlefield. I don't know if I have the skill to make it happen on my own, but if somebody out there can do it, or if anybody knows of one that's out there somewhere, please send it our way. So one thing we failed to mention is right at the top of the song, the first sound that you hear are these harsh blowing wind noises that come in, and they will come back right at the end of the song as we transition into the next track, Melting.
A King Gizz song about climate change? No, it couldn't.
No.
Would they really do
way.
that? No. The obligatory. Yeah, it's such a mainstay on most of their albums. This is one of their more straightforward songs about, hey, climate change is an issue that's staring us right in the face and we're doing nothing about it. Here's what's happening in the meantime while we're neglecting it. The first few lyrics, some shocking ones to open this song, by the way. Thawing ices worse than ISIS, worse than the most deadly virus. Living harmonious is desirous. How can we with absent-mindedness? Whew.
Yeah.
Heavy shit for the first couple lyrical lines of a song.
The first verse just really tells it like it is and lets us know right away what the song's getting at if you couldn't have already guessed just by the title alone.
The line, worse than the most deadly virus, stands out to me. This is 2017, so 3 years pre-COVID. I don't know if much is up for debate here between, what's the bigger danger between the two, but suffice it to say, both are very dangerous and cause a lot of destruction and loss. But
these are all things that suck.
Yeah. there are some creative rhymes present in this song that rival that of Planet B to me. The scarification, colonization that you get on Planet B. There's some similar types of rhyming in the lyrics here in Melting. We mentioned the thawing ices, worse than ISIS, worse than the most deadly virus. And it continues down. The earth is melting down, our home and our playground. And there are examples to be found throughout the song. There are creative rhyme schemes up and down the lyrics listed here as I'm scrolling through it on Spotify, in between just these low-key choruses of repeating melting, melting, melting in this mysterious kind of foreboding tone.
Yeah, I love the creativity of the rhymes and just the overall flow of the lyrics here. And like we already were kind of getting at, of course, this song is all about global warming. The human-influenced heating of the earth will continue to cause the ice caps to melt and destroy the planet, and there's no way we can live harmoniously when that happens. And the chorus, of course, very much continuing that message as the verse was already getting at. The earth is melting down, our home and our playground won't be fit for children when our world has melted down. The way the words kind of bounce with won't be fit for children when our world, with the keyboards and everything going along to it, is so weird. And Again, I've said this before about a lot of these songs, but I didn't know that those were the lyrics for the longest time. But along with this very clear and serious message, this song is such a funky groove, man. Like that drum shuffle really carries the song, in my opinion. It's so cool and almost even a little danceable. Like I can't help but do a little shimmy to it, kind of like every time I hear the song. And I can't praise the instrumentation enough without a special shout out to the keyboard riffs on this one. I'd love just that electric piano really adds to the funkiness, and it's just so catchy. I can't help but love it. This is a perfect example of classic King Gizz contrast that they do in their songs, where the shit is groovy and funky as hell and upbeat, but the song's about the planet dying every time.
Every time, indeed. And yeah, Stu is credited with playing the synth on this song, and you get a couple of different feels on that synth. You get that low bubbling kind of that which fits in perfect lockstep with the drums. Also important to note that Cavs is the only drummer on this song. Eric does not appear on this track. So Cavs with that crazy, just thrashing drum beat, almost solo-esque, as the song sort of slowly fades in after we heard the last of Rattlesnake. And then, like you said, the drums meld with those lower keyboards so seamlessly. And we also get those higher keyboard tones at at least that's the best way I can imitate it with my mouth.
Yep.
And it adds, as you said so creatively, Joe, it's like this perfect mix of grooviness and darkness that these guys execute so well. So a couple of fun, random, quick facts on this song. This is performed, in fact, by 3 guys, Stu, Cavs, and Lucas. They're the only ones on this track. And also, from our friends at kglw.net, this song has been played live just 5 times, last of which was in 2021, all 5 of which were in Australia. So, as we've talked on the show in the past about some live rarities that the band doesn't play much, maybe we should add this one to our lists.
I didn't even realize it's that rare of a song to hear live, but I would not be mad if I did. I love this one.
So as those ice caps are melting, what naturally happens? Well, you get a big body of open water.
So I originally had a note written here for the top of this song saying that the wind noises return, but listening back to it again, it almost sounds a little different. It kind of sounds more like ocean, like waves kind of flowing, just like the static hum of the sea that you would hear when you're at the beach or something. So maybe that's what it's intended to be here. Instead of wind, it's water this time. And man, we are picking up the pace as far as tempo goes a bit here. We have a much faster, energetic drum groove, and the guitar right at the beginning is just jamming on that one note, like something's coming. Just bow, 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 bow. It is it is hype right from the beginning. I love the that they change up the tempo from song to song a bit, and this one comes in swinging.
It does, and there are some similarities in the way these 2 consecutive tracks open. As you mentioned, the rushing water that kind of sounds like the wind that we heard in the last couple of tracks at the beginning and at the end. It is accompanied once again by some thrashing drums, although this time it's both Cavs and Eric appearing on this track, and it's just such a big pickup in the energy in the album, as you mentioned here on track 3. And I don't think this was an accident that the song Melting led into Open Water. That had to have been planned from the start. Just the sheer results of, okay, these ice caps are melting, it's causing these coastlines to erode and disappear into the ocean as the water levels are rising, and they present it, as always, in such an interesting and fun way, very energetic in this case.
Lyrics like open water, where's the shore gone, and height of the sea will bury me, and all I see is open water. It's very clearly a continuation of what was going on in the last song in Melting. All that ice melted down, and now we have water, just lots and lots of water.
Lots and lots of water, and I think you skipped over the line, which is okay, but I wanted to point out the line, how'd I falter, which is the third little line of the lyrics here. That's pointing out kind of a realization like, oh, shit, I screwed up by not helping fight against this. You know,
did I do that?
There's the there's the realization, that this is all caused by human activity and carelessness. And whoops, sorry.
Yeah, it's basically like just a moment of self-awareness where things are too late and the earth is completely flooded and you're sitting there like, oh, what did we do wrong? How did we get to this point? Like, uh-oh, no going back now. God damn it. One moment of this song that I really, really love, again, we talked about sort of the fun, faster vocal sections on the last song. This track has one of those as well. The section at about 4:25, Stu comes in with, I know something's been lurking in the depths of murky water. There are bubbles and ripples and... There are ripples and bubbles appearing over by the sunken ship and bells are ringing in. It just keeps going with this pattern, and I love it's such a unique, fun moment. I love those faster, kind of rapid-fire delivery where it's like kind of puts you in this panic of like, oh, shit's really wrong. How did we get here? What's happening? There's something lurking over there. There's this and that. And it's scary. It's all scary.
It's scary. And I like how you describe it as sort of a panic, an oh shit moment. Like there's something under the water here that may be coming to get me. And sure enough, at the timestamp 4 minutes 51 seconds. Look, it's the Kraken, everybody, and not the Seattle Kraken. It's not the hockey team, the actual fucking Kraken, and it's coming to get you. I like how the song just changes course a little bit in that way. It goes from, well, here are the adverse effects of climate change and human carelessness, and it goes into this mystical, like, okay, there's this evil kraken that's coming up to grab humans and haul them under and drown them and suffocate them, like, and I don't think though that it's presented in a very jarring way. I think that the song moves seamlessly into this section, but lyrically, when you look at the lyrics, the transition and the sudden jump is pretty funny.
Yeah, it is really fun how it goes from being very serious, talking about like serious climate change problems and stuff, to just like, oh, all of a sudden there's a kraken and it's got the best of me, and I'm under all this water now and I can't find any solace or safety anywhere because there's like all these monsters and shit that live under here. There's just nothing is good about this situation. So part of this section, when he sings the word asphyxiate and it comes in like kind of really high-pitched falsetto voice, the guitar comes in at the same time and is super fast strumming the same melody along with the vocals. And I just love moments like that. And it kind of reminds me of something in like a System of a Down song. And, and they are, those guys are Armenian. So they play around with a lot of those kind of Eastern sounds in their music as well. I don't think they really do like microtonal stuff, but you can hear elements of these Eastern modes and scales and things being used in their music. So yeah, I don't know. I can't think of a particular song of theirs at the moment off the top of my head that does this exact kind of thing. But yeah, just reminds me of something that like System of a Down would do. And I just love those guys.
That's a cool observation. Yeah, I never thought of that, but I absolutely understand where you're coming from there. But such a cool song, and it evokes a couple of different emotions to me. Of course, we mentioned the difference in the various passages of this song between the realization of human-caused climate change and the mystical nature of the Kraken and what it's trying to do. Throughout this song, there's just this undertone of fear, and I think when it comes to the sort of the hierarchy or the Mount Rushmore, or whatever you want to call it, of King Gizz tracks that evoke nightmare fuel, at least for me, right up there with Big Fig Wasp, for me personally, is this one. I have never felt all that comfortable in water. Like, I'll go dip in the pool, I'll wade around like chest high, whatever. But I've never been a guy that enjoys being submerged in water or having that brief feeling of
not an ocean guy.
Gotta get back to the surface. No, absolutely not.
No.
And so the imagery of this music, cool as the song is, top 5 nightmare material among Gizz songs for me.
Dude, water is scary. I get it.
Yeah. But they present it in such an effective way. It's a fantastic song.
Yeah, the uncertainty of what's under there, especially if you're talking about like being at the beach and going into the ocean and shit, like feel something rub against your leg that you can't see or whatever. It's terrifying. The ocean is scary as hell.
It is.
Okay, so we're drifting along the top of all this open water and, well, for lack of a better segue, I'm just using the word drifting to take me into the next track called Sleep Drifter.
Hell of a transition.
I can see you next to me, and it is lovely. Sleep drifter.
Track number 4, a beauty. I love this song. Stu sings in a couple of different registers on this song, and I like how it's separated by the little mini chorus of sleep drifter, and he shifts from almost that falsetto, drifting in and out of sleep, and then after the sleep drifter little mini chorus, he goes into a lower register, I can feel you touch me, and of course I'm way off key there, but you get the idea. He sings in the lower register of that section of the song. I think the fact that he sings in these 2 different registers aligns well with the theme of the song, Sleep Drifter. Drifting in and out of sleep. You're kind of in this in-between state. You're sort of half asleep here, and then, you're a little more awake, and then your body drifts off again. And this song is all about being tired and haggard and exhausted on the road and being in that sort of imaginative, like half-lucid sleep state where he feels close to his partner, and there's sort of that loneliness and the disconnectedness that one can experience on the road when you're traveling for long periods of time on tour, and that's hinted directly by the words, I can feel you touch me and I can hear you breathing, please no one wake me when I'm sleep drifting, reality begins to fray, you'll become so close to me in a hotel far away. Pretty clear to me, like Stu misses his, I don't think she was his wife yet, but partner. And it's sort of like an ode to, I miss you, but this is how I feel close to you during these times.
That's a really nice way to put it, to connect it to the idea of like them being away on tour, away from their loved ones, like Stu thinking about, like his wife or partner at the time, whatever. And because to me, this song is, just about finding like comfort and escape from the chaos of the outside world. I wasn't specifically thinking of it within the context of them being on the road or anything, but I think you're definitely in the right mindset there. But yeah, just like finding escape from the chaos and just appreciating little things like laying down in bed with the person you love next to you and just drifting away to happy dream world, away from the hell of a dying earth outside. So, this song is a little slower, a lot more chill than what we heard on the last song. It's a nice contrast from the chaos of open water that we just heard before this one.
I like the way that the opening guitar part at the beginning of this song descends. Do, 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 do. It almost evokes like drifting off to sleep and going off to dreamland. Yeah. So I think that's a really effective device. I'm going to jump ahead here to another standout part of this song. 3 minutes even, like right on the button there. After a short instrumental section, Stu's singing Sleep Drifter about 8 times over. To me, this section was almost tailor-made to leave the door open to some improv and some jam in live settings. And I have not done my research on this, unfortunately. I haven't listened to a lot of live performances of Sleep Drifter, but that is just like such a blank canvas part of the song to me, to where the instrumentation is a little bit lower key, things drop out, Stu's voice is a little more isolated, and it just sort of leaves that door open, so to speak, to sort of a jammier section that the band might choose to work in a live setting.
Yeah, good point there. I could totally see that. I'm sure they keep that sort of thing in mind all the time when they're writing and recording music, and, you know, including little sections like this where they know, okay, here when we play this one live, you know, we could just go crazy and do whatever the hell we want for a little while. And I was going to guess that this was also a song that wasn't played too often live, but pulling up the page for this track on kglw.net, apparently it has actually been played 155 times, which is way more than I would have guessed.
Wow, same.
And it was just last played as of today. It was last played on November 1st, 2024, which was 10 shows ago. So just a couple weeks ago, it was played at one of the shows. So I guess not too much of a rare one to hear. So we'll have to look up whatever that last show was that they played it and see what they did with this moment of the song, and if you're onto something there.
I'm glad they pull this one out so frequently live, and I do hope to see this one sometime in the future. We mentioned before that we got our tickets to the Philly Orchestral show that's coming up next July, and
yes.
I'm excited for that one. I'm not sure which tracks will fit into the orchestral motif, but I'm really curious to see what they do with that. But going back to the song here, Sleep Drifter, I like the way that this transitions back into another instrumental section to close it out just before the 4-minute mark, so about the last 45 to 50 seconds of the song. You get that palm-muted wah pedal guitar again. Wacka wow 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 wacka wow wow. It's almost like an animal snarling.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's necessarily trying to evoke that specifically, but that's just what it reminds me of. It takes a relatively chill song and gives it a little bit of a bite at the end.
Yeah, that wad out guitar is chomping away, and there's kind of like a mini guitar solo there that starts jamming out as the song starts to fade out, and then the bass line of the next track begins to creep its way in, doesn't it, Spencer?
It does, and that next track is a fan favorite. Here's Billabong Valley.
Outlaws on the run faster than a stolen gun. There, I threw a little twang on there for us Americans there. That's what the real country version of this song would sound like. But this song here, this is a classic, and this is what I like to refer to as the Western of this album. It's got like an old cowboy kind of story with theming that wouldn't be too out of place on maybe Eyes Like the Sky, which is a project of theirs we don't bring up much. That thematic vibe, but through the lens of this very Eastern-sounding microtonal landscape, it is just a really interesting contrast and makes this such a standout, unique song, just across in the whole catalog in general.
I'm over here laughing my ass off this whole time because that twang came halfway through that lyric. The twang wasn't there for the first time.
I can't help it. I naturally, I'm saying the words outlaws and singing this country sounding lyrics. I can't help, as an American, I can't help but throw a little Southern twang on there. And I'm from fucking Pennsylvania, bro. I don't have an accent like that, but I can't help it. It felt so natural.
Yeah. No, you're right on with that though. You're totally on point. And I learned something new actually with this song. This song was actually based on a true story about an Australian bush ranger named Daniel Morgan. For those unfamiliar with sort of Australian history, mostly for our American friends here for reference, an Australian bush ranger was similar more or less to an American stagecoach robber back in the Old West days. So very, very much that Old West outlaw, that type of situation. But Daniel Morgan, I guess, was kind of like a Billy the Kid or something like that equivalent figure during that time in Australian history. But this song is just has become such an illustrious fan favorite, such a standout in many of the band's live sets. And Joe, you were fortunate enough at that Detroit acoustic show to get a rousing rendition of this song.
Yes, I was. I was very blessed to hear a really great acoustic rendition of this song at at the Detroit Acoustic Show back in August of this year, only a few days before we saw them here in Philly. And during that song, Ambrose likes to get real animated, wander around the stage, wander into the crowd during his kind of times to shine, like this song. And they did Straws in the Wind as well, which is another, kind of similar, another microtonal, ambi-led song. But during this track, he climbed up onto, there was a semi-truck trailer backed up off the side of the stage that I guess was loading in gear for the show. And he climbed up onto that truck and was just yelling during the instrumental sections, "I'm on a truck! I'm on a truck!" So look up the video of Ambrose doing Billabong Valley in Detroit. It was, it was so fun. Such a highlight for me, a great time. But that's interesting. I didn't actually look into the real story of the real Daniel Morgan. And just quickly Googling him real fast, I get a Google result here for a 1976 Western film called Mad Dog Morgan. And now I really want to check that out. I have kind of a soft spot for old movies like this. I've never really been a big Western guy, but man, just with the context and the connection to a King Gizz song, I feel like I got to check it out.
Just under a minute into the song, actually, Ambrose does make reference to the name Mad Dog Morgan, so there is that connection there within the lyrics. Right after he brings it back from a short instrumental jaunt with anti-authority, Mad Dog Morgan, he never gave a warning. Mad Dog Morgan shot in the back by morning, so he was eventually killed.
Spoiler alert.
Whoops. In all fairness, it's been a couple hundred years.
it's been
had
long
your chance
enough
to read the story.
The statute of limitations on that is up. I have to just say that for the longest time, I thought the lyric was Mad Dog Mulligan, and that's just the way I heard it. The way he draws out the name Morgan sounds like Mulligan to me. I don't know who Mulligan is. I don't know. It's some, Irish dude somewhere probably, but Mad Dog Mulligan is what I heard forever until I actually looked at the lyrics and figured it out. So, I'm sorry in advance to anyone listening who now forever hears that in the words instead of Morgan, but that's how it's been for me for the longest time.
Yep. Thanks so much for that, Joe. Appreciate it as always. I have to comment, though, on just how different this song sounds from the studio version to the live version. This is another one of those songs that really gets a facelift, in my opinion, when it's performed live. As I said, I haven't yet had the opportunity to hear this one, to see this one live, but this is a track that bounces a little bit and it has a fun tone to it, but this one just goes so much harder live, usually aided by Ambi's antics, whether that's hopping on top of a truck or, crowd surfing with the cowboy hat on top of the inflatable alligator. That was early on the first leg of this past tour here. But he just adds so much liveliness and fun to this track. And I also want to commend just a couple of things that add to the feel and the vibes of this song. It's obviously about a dangerous outlaw who did a lot of terrible things to people as he made his way through the Australian outback. But number one, you have this pulsating electric piano that's permeating the track, dun, 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 dun. And it lends almost like an upbeat feel to this otherwise dark tale. Almost gives it like a rockabilly or a boogie woogie feel. And
like
then,
NGRI.
Yeah, it's very similar to NGRI, except that I get the impression though that this is more a couple of different notes and like full chords rather than just one single piano.
Just the
key,
single note
like
for
NGRI.
3 minutes straight.
Yeah, but and then. But the second part of my point here is that Ambrose, just with his very nature of just his fun-loving ways and his almost tongue-in-cheek delivery of most of the songs that he sings, I have in my notes here, it has that fun Ambrose storytelling vibe. Like, I imagine him, sitting some kids down at a library, like, with a book in his hand, like, with that wild-eyed look on his face. All right, friends, here's the tale of Daniel Morgan. And he's just telling them all the funny details of this story, and he was a bad, bad man. That's just the vibe that this one has to me, and it's so fun. I love it very much.
Yeah, definitely. I like that imagery that you're painting in my head right now. It feels just about right. Ambi with all the kids gathered around and a book on his lap, like, gather around, children. I love that. It's he's a good storyteller. I don't know if he wrote these lyrics himself or if it was a collaboration between multiple of the guys, but either way, I love his delivery of it. And, generally the lyrics on this song are pretty simple. We have a single verse and a single chorus that is repeated. So the verse is the same exact lyrics, but said twice. And, but it doesn't feel old. It doesn't feel repetitive. It's not super repetitive in general other than just that point. But, really fun, really unique, special song that's always going to be a standout for years to come in their discography. One thing I was just going to mention is that we do have a big return of the zurna once again, which is, of course, is that horn wind instrument that we've heard come up a couple times. It's very popular and commonly found in a lot of different Asian and Middle Eastern cultures. I've seen mainly, most typically you see them in Armenian folk music, actually, but also a lot of Turkish as well and some other places. So, the way that comes in screaming after the chorus of just... It's just screaming along to the guitar and the main vocal melody and everything. So, just another cool thing. I love how startling that is every time when it comes into the song.
So Billabong Valley eventually fades out and gives way to track number 6, Anoxia.
I don't care, take a chance. You said, man, the coins in your pants, it made no sound for me, my friend.
Now, this one is a super underrated and underappreciated track, in my opinion, and I think it deserves a lot more love. It wasn't one that stood out to me much at first, but let me tell you, it has seriously grown on me the more I've listened to this album, to the point where I can very confidently say it's one of my favorites. And I know we list our top 3 at the end of the track by track section here and everything, but I just gotta lay that one out there right now. I love Anoxia.
This is a cool track, and we should note that Joey makes his first lead vocal appearance here on the album. He wrote and sang this one. Anoxia, before we go any further, just to give a definition, anoxia is the condition in which the body or parts of the body don't receive the required amount of oxygen to function properly. I am so glad, Joe, that you took so many notes and took so much stock in this song and made so many different observations of it, because this one has always flown under the radar to me. That being said, I do enjoy it a lot, but this is one of those tracks where, looking at the lyrics, I had a little bit of a tough time making sense of it.
Yeah, just reading it, just at face value, looking at the lyrics, it's a little tough to put together, but fortunately I did a little more digging with the help of the website Genius, and also KGLW.net was a big help in getting a little bit more background info. So I actually have a good amount of stuff here I could get into to help explain what this one seems to be about. So like you said, anoxia is when an organ in the body completely loses oxygen, and it's the result of hypoxia, which is a condition of just having low oxygen in the body, where, like your organs or multiple organs aren't receiving enough oxygen to continue functioning properly. So how does this connect? Because this word anoxia isn't used in the lyrics at all. So how does that connect to what the song's saying here? Well, the song describes a morbid scenario in which the land is being ravaged by wildfires, possibly as a result of some apocalyptic level climate change. However, there may be some inspiration here from real events. In 2009, in Victoria, Australia, which is the area of Australia where Melbourne is located, where the band is from, Victoria suffered a series of major wildfires known as the Black Saturday bushfires. 173 people tragically lost their lives, 414 more were injured, and more than 1 million wild and domesticated animals were lost. And I got this information from nma.gov.au. That's the website for the National Museum of Australia. So just incredibly devastating stuff here, and I'm sorry for the bit of a downer to lay that on you, but that seems to be very likely that these events did inspire the lyrics. So to connect that more to actually what's in the words of the song, the first verse, in my opinion, is actually pretty abstract and vague, and it's not until you get to the chorus where it really starts to clear up the picture of what's going on here. A family sleeps at the crease. They died by fire, but they felt no heat. I could wear a jumper sewn out of the irony. The chorus is describing a family that is sleeping in possibly a cricket field, because the word crease is what they call the different lines on a cricket pitch. They died from the fires, but not in the way that you would initially think. They don't burn, but instead they succumb to anoxia, that lack of oxygen from the fires suffocating them, even if they aren't too close to the actual fire to be burned. And then the line, I could wear a jumper sewn out of the irony being that they avoided the actual heat of the fires, but they still died due to them. So it's like the irony of the situation is so tangible that you could literally sew clothing with it. And it's really clever stuff here. And I love that line very, very much.
Yeah. I just like the musical landscape of this song. The da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, and just the menacing vocal delivery from Joey. It all fits together very nicely, and I'm so glad you did the research on that, Joe, because that paints once again a vivid picture of the issues that the whole globe really is facing with this lack of climate control, lack of effort from the proper authorities, whatever words you want to ascribe to all this. It's putting people in grave danger. It's causing horrible destruction. Something needs to be done. And yet again, Gizz puts it together in a nice musical package.
Yeah, really, really. And some more lines that I love. The second verse, let my body be aquatic, burn us a road straight to the sea. So the speaker is hoping that the fires burn a path from the wilderness to the sea just so they can escape the burning land. And I guess they also wish to just be able to breathe underwater or survive under there or something and live there instead, just so they'd be safe from the ravaged burning lands up above.
So fairly recently, Joe, and I think I mentioned this to you when we were messaging back and forth recently, our buddy Greg, who is not really much of a Gizz head, but has heard a little bit of their music and appreciates some of it to an extent. He mentioned that you played this song for him when you guys and I guess some other friends were together, and he said to me that it was a really cool song. It really opened up my eyes, and then he sort of turned back to me over his shoulder and said, "Open up my third eye." That is
okay. This is really funny that you bring this up because I had a whole little kind of anecdote about this interaction that I was going to say to help prove my point as to how great this song is. Sorry if this is going off on a tangent a little bit, but yeah, so recently I had some friends over for a little backyard campfire hangout sort of thing, and I had this Spotify generated rock playlist playing on a Bluetooth speaker, and it was just like a mix of different bands I love, and naturally there's plenty of Gizz in there. This song was one of them, and yes, it quickly caught the ear of this good friend, Greg, this good friend of mine, who hadn't given Gizz much of a listen prior. He'd heard a little bit of their stuff from me, of course, but didn't know a lot, and he was absolutely grooving to this song, and a minute or so into the song, he was asking me, like, is this King Gizzard? And I was immediately excited to tell him all about this album, and proceeded to show him a bunch more Microtonal Gizz tracks after that.
Data dump!
Yeah, and exactly. He opened up the floodgates for me to start dumping, and of course, I started showing him a bunch of their other Microtonal stuff from like KG and LW and everything, and it's just kind of him and I were like in our own world while the other people sitting around like were just being tortured by this, and yeah, he was really into it. And full discretion, I do believe he had taken a nice rip of a marijuana pen just minutes before this, or the Benjamin as the kids call it. But either way, I think this helps my case as to how fucking great this song is.
Yeah, and whether or not you're consuming substances, Benjamin or otherwise, I think that this song is just so damn cool, and I think it could easily make a musical impression on somebody listening who is not necessarily into Gizz from the get-go. We've talked in passing about what songs might we curate to show our non-Gizz listening friends, like to try and make an impression, maybe get them to appreciate the band a little bit more. I wouldn't say that this one up until now would have been high on my list, but this one is just so intriguing that maybe that's worth a second thought.
Yeah, it just goes to show that everybody has different tastes and can have something different within their discography that stands out to them. Some people might be immediately caught by something more fast and heavy like Petro or Infest the Rat's Nest. Somebody else might like really chill stuff. But, this one in this case really caught my friend's ear and stood out to him. And that's what was able to open the door to get him into listening to more of the band's music. So I'm glad it worked. I just think the song has that perfect mix of a serious message, a tragic backstory, and just amazing, instrumentation, amazing musicality behind it. It is so groovy and fun to listen to at the same time of having this deeper meaning to it. I think it just hits all of the bars for me.
Totally agree.
One other just little piece of the song I'll mention is at 2 minutes 15 seconds, there's a really cool acoustic guitar solo, followed by the screaming zurna once again comes in blaring as the guitar's going like bow, dow, 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 dow. Kind of mimicking the main vocal melody from the verses. So yeah, another really cool moment of the song, and after that there's a final repetition of the chorus, and the song becomes very distant, and the pitch begins to shift downward as it, gets darker and spookier and transitions into the next track, which is, of course, Doom City.
Doom City indeed. This is such a dark intro to this 7th song on the album, and I love the way that it introduces this one. It's got that low menacing boo doo doo doo, and then the wah pedal comes in and the song gets so much heavier. Wow, 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 wow. And I remember enjoying this song so much when they performed it live in Philly when we were there back in August. It picked the crowd's energy up so much. The transition between the sludgy, slower sections and the more upbeat sections of this song, it just keeps an audience on its toes, and I just love the alternating of it. It's not the only song on this album that sort of has a jumping back and forth between different paces, different tempos, but this is the latest example on the album, and I freaking love this one too.
Yeah, it's slow, but it really does have this menacing energy behind it. This initial guitar riff that comes in is just too fitting of the word doom being in the title. And man, I can't help but immediately point out how fun it always is to sing doo-doo-doo, Doom City, doo-doo-doo, Doom City over and over again. Doesn't get old, and yeah, like you said, we saw this live in Philly. It was seriously a highlight of that show for me. It just went so hard live. It was really exciting, and I think that was the only song of this album that we got at that show. I got to hear more of it at that Detroit acoustic show, but that's the only one we got in Philly. So, but man, I mean, a hell of one for them to pick. It was awesome. Very exciting.
Yeah, in the Philly show, they opened up with several microtonal tracks, one after the other, and this, without having the set list in front of me, I believe this was number 3 on the night. But yeah, it was just such an effective way to keep that crowd energy going, and there was, of course, the sing-along value between the slower, sludgier parts where it's Doom City, just more drawn out like that, and the part that you mentioned, Joe, doo-doo-doom, Doom City, doo-doo-doom, doo. And I admittedly didn't have as much of a relationship with this song at that time, but I was able to sing along with those chorus parts. I just love the way that this one jumps back and forth, as I said, and some more kind of haunting lyrics on this track that presented another little bit of a challenge to me, but it's more menace, more foreboding stuff, and it just contributes to the increasingly what's seemingly an increasingly dark feel on this album.
Yeah. So enough about the music itself. We love it, but what's the song about? Well, the first verse right at the beginning, I think I'll die when Doom City air this way comes. I can't help but immediately think that this is a callback to the last track, Anoxia, and that the speaker of this song is fearing that oxygen depleted air as a result of the fires and everything is moving across the land to where he is and is going to kill him too.
Yeah, I think that's about as good of a theory as I could have come up with. A line that catches my eye here as I'm scrolling through the lyrics: spark in firmament, Doom City sky opens up, he disorients, everyone lives with his breath, charged with particles, Doom City air rips me up. It's almost very Petro-like here. It's almost like there's fire above, there's fire in all directions, and there's this menacing source of the fire that's just consuming everything. I'm just reminded so much of Flamethrower, I think, is the one that's coming to mind for me. Yeah,
I totally agree. The lyrically doesn't feel like it'd be too out of place on something like Petro or something, talking about fire and the sky opening up and all that shit. Sounds kind of familiar after talking about that one not too long ago. Another thing that I find interesting about it is He, Empyrean, breathes from his mouth and over tongue. And so I had to get this from a note on Genius because I didn't know what Empyrean meant. But according to a note on Genius, in ancient cosmologies, the Empyrean heaven, or simply the Empyrean, was the place in the highest heaven which was supposed to be occupied by the element of fire. So this is all news to me. This is some more kind of deeper stuff. Speaking of talking about, Petro and the silver cord and having to get into some weird deep mythology shit, this is kind of up there in that territory, totally foreign to me. But I do find it interesting that in the song, this character, the speaker, is kind of personifying the fires and the deadly air in this way by saying he, and, connecting it to the Empyrean or this like fiery heaven or whatever. Like I said, this is new to me, but yeah, just an interesting personification. You hear him say he in reference to it more than once on this song.
Yeah, another song with an element that we had to research, or I say we, Joe, that was all you, so good work on that. There are still through lines present from one track to another, and once again, the appearance of the zurna. It's present on so many songs on this album, but this time it's only during the slow, sludgier sections of this song, and I don't think it's necessarily playing any real coherent notes. It's just kind of squealing out in pain.
Yes.
It's like this, and it adds to the agony of the song that the lyrics are trying to impart. Yeah, that's basically what it sounds like, right?
Great recreation there, yes. You sound just as in as much pain as that instrument does.
Yeah, probably what I would sound like if a big fig wasp got to me one day, God forbid.
That's what and that's what you would sound like if you were suffering from anoxia and were running out of oxygen. Just
Or anoxia. Yeah, thank you for tying it right back to the appropriate album, Joe. But I love how that element just keeps reappearing more and more between the zurna, the microtonal guitar, and the microtonal harmonica. This was an album that, with increased listens, I've just come to appreciate so much more.
Definitely, and I have to point something out that I didn't think too much about ahead of time, but actually accidentally came across this little anecdote about this song while doing my research. So there's this like evil high-pitched cackling sound that comes in right at the end of the first verse as it's transitioning into the chorus. I always just thought of it of like, okay, it's like they were all laughing and just pitched it up high, so it sounds like a little goblin laugh or something. But actually, this is a sample of a kookaburra, which is insane to me. It's this weird bird that's native to Australia, and that is just crazy because I never would have guessed it if I didn't accidentally come across this info. And this was actually on genius.com as well. But just revisit this part of the song and then look up a video of a kookaburra laughing, and you can totally hear it. It's so funny that they included that.
Kookaburra sits in the old gum tree, eating all the gumdrops he can see. God, do you know that one?
Nope.
Oh, damn.
I have no idea what you're going on about.
It's like some little Australian like folk song or kid song, or it might be from New Zealand originally. But that's what I think of anytime I hear the word kookaburra. I can't help myself. I had like an old cassette tape back in the day when I was little of all these folk songs from different countries, and that was one of them.
Okay.
But yeah, okay.
Nice.
I'm so glad you found out the source of that little cackle. I think that registered with me on a subconscious level at one point or another listening to this song. I never would have thought that it was a bird, though, but the kookaburra makes sense because I've seen little bits and pieces of National Geographic or Animal Planet or whatever where people are up close with these foreign animals, and you just get like this cool up close look and the sounds of said animals. And I've definitely heard the kookaburra in those types of media before. Mm-hmm. I think a human cackle is probably not out of place on this track, and I think it's just more appropriate that there's this almost like an evil force personified within this song that's alluded to by the awkwardly human-sounding kookaburra laugh.
Yeah, now I can't help but picture that this particular kookaburra is like the one setting everything on fire and then making it look like it's the human's fault. And like when it says he, I'm picturing like just a bird, like a silly little bird. And it's like, he's doing this, he's burning everything. I'm just going to think of that from now on, this mental image of like a giant monster version of a kookaburra.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, now that's nightmare fuel.
Yes, there you go. There's another one to add to your list. Speaking of evil laughter, there's another one that comes in right towards the end with the lyric, Doom City Sky makes him laugh. And then we get that, oh, ho, 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 ho.
Doom City Sky makes him laugh.
Really low, menacing laugh, and then that main riff comes in again. The zurna is shrieking in pain, like we said. And then there's also, towards the end there's this other guitar part that comes in that's panned hard left. And I specifically love at 2 minutes 50 seconds when it like does this little it's like descending. It's just another one of those little touches that I just love that stand out to me. I don't know why my voice got so high pitched there when I said but I'm just excited, I guess. So yeah, that's the track. It gets kind of like reverb soaked and disoriented at the end and just comes to a pretty clean close. That's Doom City, man.
Yeah, there is so much depth to this track, and the album just continues to gain momentum, and that momentum rolls right along into the penultimate track on the album, Nuclear Fusion.
I will never get tired of hearing that deep, menacing voice. Nuclear fusion. I think you nailed it perfectly right there, Spencer, so thank you for that. But, oh, man, god damn, I love the groove of this track so much. I know I've used the word funky quite a bit on a couple of these songs, but this one is so funky, but in this, again, dark, menacing way. That bass line is so sick right at the beginning. The do 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 do, and the drums are amazing. Of course, this is in the prime of them having two drummers, Eric and Cavs. They're going back and forth. They start out in sync, but then their patterns alter slightly. And I really love how each of their hi-hats are going at a different rhythm. So in one ear, you hear it just like a straight up, just like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the other ear, it's like every other beat it's being hit. If you listen to it again, you know what I'm talking about, but it's so cool. And then they take turns doing their little drum fills while the other continues the main beat. They do this on a lot of these songs and a lot of the music in general at this time, but this is just one of those examples where it's done so well, and the rhythm section is just everything to me in this track.
Yeah, the rhythm section does play a huge role in this one. As someone who didn't get into the band until just last year, 2023, a part of me is really sad that I never got to experience in real time the excellence that was the interplay between Cavs and Eric, simultaneously on the drums, whether it be in a live setting or on a newly released album that I could have witnessed as a listener at that time. But that just means I have to take every opportunity I can to really let go and sort of appreciate with my ears and with my eyes, in the case of looking at old performances, just how much they lent to each track when they were both playing on songs. And I think that's so apparent on this one, between the funkiness and the relative bounce and just the jamminess on this song. Oh my god, it's all such a good feel. This has to be one of my absolute favorites off the album. Not to give away too much ahead of our top 3 favorites, but I don't think that's groundbreaking information for any fellow Gizz head, really.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to try to tip my hat too much right now, because we're gonna give our top 3 and everything at the end, but we're almost there. But yeah, no surprise if this is anyone's favorite on this album. This is a masterpiece, an absolute classic, and one that is so fun if you get to experience it live. I'm very lucky that I did get an acoustic version of it at that Detroit show this year. And the really fun thing about this song live is that every time they do it, or at least recently, they always pick somebody out of the audience to come up and scream nuclear fusion right at the beginning before they go into it. And at that show that I was at when they did it, they brought up this young kid. I think his name was Vincent. I talked about it in our post-show wrap-up episode. If you want to hear us talk more about our experiences there, go check that episode out. But yeah, they brought up this kid, and he was young. He had to be maybe not much older than like 10 or something, and he just absolutely killed it and screamed it, and everybody was going ape shit. Like it was a highlight for me. So really just a top tier song to get live if you do get to experience it.
Yeah, audience member involvement is always a win in my book, and I'm so glad that you got to see that one live. I'm super jealous. I want to see this one live someday, and I'm sure with the wealth of Gizz shows that I plan to take in the future, I'm sure you do too. I'm sure we will get the chance to both see that live at the same time together. But the directions that this song goes in lyrically, this is another wacky twist and turn on the album, at least to me, evidenced by the research that you filled me in on, Joe, that you were doing leading up to the recording of this episode.
Yep.
You gave me a screenshot, and I'm just like thinking, okay, how weird do our algorithms and our search histories have to look after researching almost any given Gizz album? Just the wealth of different topics and fields of study that we have to dive into to make sense of some of these songs.
Yeah, my current search history right next to each other has cricket popping crease, and then afterwards parts of an atom. So everything from the sport of cricket to down to the atomic structure of everything. That's the research I'm doing here in preparation for this fucking album. God, they just,
like a true Renaissance man.
Yes, this band just takes me in the wildest directions. I learn about things I never thought I would have to before. But yeah, speaking of that research about atoms, I'm going to get into a little bit about what I think this song is about. It's kind of generally talking about how connected everything in the universe is, from the smallest particles being atoms to the stars in the sky. There are patterns that stay consistent across all these scales regardless of size, like how planets may orbit a star. That mimics how electrons orbit an atom, for example. And the speaker is kind of pointing out, seeing patterns in the world from these very small things to these very large things.
Yeah, everything is interconnected, and I think that part of the takeaway of this song, I don't know if this is what's intended, but this is what I'm gathering from it. It kind of hints back at the togetherness of people. We all come from a similar origin, similar places, as is being stated in this song, and it's almost like an encouragement to coexist more peacefully with one another. That's sort of what I'm getting out of this.
Yeah, exactly. All right in the chorus, all the bonds that be couldn't tear us from eventually fusing tightly. We're essentially one being, nuclear fusion. So it's kind of, I think it's kind of getting at, like, no matter what happens, the classic matter cannot be created or destroyed sort of thing. So the atoms that make up the elements on our bodies are the same basic particles that make up everything, like something as massive as the stars in the sky. And I don't know, we're all just one and the same, man.
Just after the 3-minute mark, there's a cool little keyboard part before the final couple of lines of lyrics. It's this keyboard that goes, and it's just contributing to this wealth scattered across this album of fun little instrumental parts that are frequently sprinkled toward the back end of tracks that give a little more character, some more depth, some more uniqueness to each song. And that was just one little part of the song that I wanted to kind of give a plug to.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of cool keys on this song, and actually right after that moment that you're pointing out, at about 3 minutes 21 seconds, as the harmonica is blowing, you get the bass then right after that imitating the vocals, doing like the do 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 do. The bass, is doing that, and it's just, again, another one of these little kind of more quiet instrumental moments between the lyrics like this that I just really appreciate.
Yeah, and I love the through line of that melody through the song. It almost sounds like something like spiritually ceremonial in nature, and it just gives another little bit of mysticism to this track. Love, love, love it.
All that I ever see is nuclear fusion. All that I ever hear is nuclear fusion. It's everywhere. It's all around us. It's everything. Right at the end of the song, there's one big final low growl of nuclear fusion.
Bravo.
Right at the top and
Bravo.
Right at the end. Just a thank you. Just a masterpiece. And that one wraps up. That's the end of Nuclear Fusion. So, we had Rattlesnake as the first and longest track of the album. So now, How about this one as the final and shortest song? This is the title track, Flying Microtonal Banana.
Charm that snake, baby. I don't know if this is technically that type of music, but it sounds very close to that quintessential snake charmer music with the, the flute player with the flute right in front of the basket, and the snake pops out and its head starts bobbing back and forth. That to me is what this kind of evokes. But it's a really cool instrumental closing to this album. You've got the zurna, the microtonal instrumentation. But before I get too far ahead of ourselves here, I just want to take a sec to appreciate that cinematic type of opening with that soft bongo drumming. You have both Cavs and Eric on the percussion on this track, and just that opening boom 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 with the soft chimes in the background. You can almost picture a movie scene. You must enter the cave of secrets. And there's like some creepy ass beast lurking in there. It's like setting a scene almost. And I love how it closes out the album as it goes onward from there.
Yeah, cinematic is a great word to describe it, and that's funny you mentioned this whole like snake charmer imagery kind of thing, because to me what I immediately picture, and maybe this goes along with your like kind of movie scene ideas, that I just feel like I'm wandering through a barren desert landscape, like scanning the horizon in search of any sign of civilization, for food or water or shelter, or maybe some lyrics, because this song has none. It's the only instrumental track, and it's right here at the end.
We haven't talked about a lot of instrumental tracks from the Gizz catalog so far on this show. In fact, I think this is only the second or the third one that we've talked about to this point.
Yeah, last episode when we talked about I'm Not In Your Mind, that was, I think, the first one we've touched on out of all the albums we've covered so far.
Yeah, but I think this one, in the decision to put it at the end of the album, a good choice by the band, and I think it leaves the door open to the listener to sort of interpret, okay, there's like a real gravity to this instrumental piece, and it almost hints at like, okay, we're having a lot of fun with this whole microtonal exploration. Keep in mind that this is Volume 1 as sort of like a subtitle to the album name. The band was already kind of tipping their hat like, we're going to do more after this. And so I think this instrumental here at the end of the album sort of left that door cracked open as a reminder to like, okay, yeah, this is packaging this one up in a nice little bundle, and stay tuned because there is more of this in the future.
Yeah, definitely. And a musical element about this that I wanted to mention is, of course, like I said, it's instrumental, and in place of any vocals, I feel like the zurna really gets its time to shine as it plays the main blaring melody on and off throughout the track. There's also some piano backing it up as well, which adds to the overall uniqueness of this song. This very unique, it really does stand out, not only just because it's instrumental, but the instrumentation, all this extra really cool percussion going on and everything makes it really special. And yeah, that zurna's screaming along. That's kind of the main carrying element of the track, so really gets to shine right here at the end. So after just about 2.5 minutes or so, the song dies off with the zurna and harmonica ringing out, the guitar strumming its final few notes, and we come full circle to that sound of the heavy blowing winds that first greeted us at the top of the album, coming back at the end, and it comes to a close. That's the end of Flying Microtonal Banana.
So as we move along here on the show, I just want to touch on the Rattlesnake music video real quickly. This was the only music video as a companion to any of the tracks on this album, and it's a relatively straightforward one, albeit with a hilariously almost low-budget look to it. The band members are all playing their instruments, and Stu is singing as the band sort of floats, so to speak, in front of this animated background of like desert landscape and rock formations and a very 3D animated looking rattlesnake slithering along the ground behind them. One thing that strikes me is the band members all look so young. I mean, this was 7 years ago. Some of the guys' styles have changed. In fact, almost all of their styles have changed. But You see Stu playing the microtonal banana guitar. You've got Ambrose playing that. I wish I knew the name of this instrument, but that sort of rattling instrument that almost evokes the sound of a rattlesnake. You got Ambrose with no mustache, also, by the way. Joey with still
that
a
always
little
trips
bit.
me up. Ambrose and Joey
yeah.
with no facial hair really fucks me
Yeah,
up.
Joey
I don't
with
like
no
it.
facial hair either. Yeah. Eric is still in the mix, obviously, and then I think Cookie might even be clean shaven too, so it's just a very different time, a different feel for the band, but it's a funny kind of animated touch type of video. Go check it out when you get the opportunity. It's a funny one.
Yes, indeed. I need to go back and revisit it. It's a goofy-ass old video. I love their music videos, and the older ones have a certain charm to them that is just unmatched. I love it. I love the cheesiness of it. All right, so let's quickly touch on our top 3 and least favorite of the whole album. Spencer, why don't you go ahead first?
Okay, so my top 3 are Sleep Drifter, Doom City, and Nuclear Fusion. This one took a little bit of figuring out for me. I did have some internal debate, but I'm very confident those are my top 3. What do you have?
Okay, we're pretty close. 2 out of 3. I went with, actually, well, I hinted at this earlier because I gave so much love to Anoxia, and my top 3 are actually all back to back to back. My top 3 are Anoxia, Doom City, and Nuclear Fusion. That 3-track run of songs is just the absolute peak of this album, in my opinion, and this was kind of an easy pick for me, I gotta say. Easier than most times with picking 3 favorites.
I will not take this Sleep Drifter erasure from you, Joe.
Hey, listen, I'll at least say this. It's not my least favorite. So
Good.
What is your least favorite?
My least favorite is the title track, Flying Microtonal Banana. I don't dislike it. It gets a little repetitive, that Zurna melody. Like, it does have other parts to it. The track does, of course. I did wish it explored a little bit more, but ultimately, like I said, I don't dislike it, and it is relatively short at the end of the day. How about you?
Oh, yeah. Yep, that's the right answer. I'm right there with you. It's kind of, I know it might seem too easy to, pick the single instrumental track as your least favorite, but, I didn't do that last time with Mind Fuzz. The I'm Not In Your Mind wasn't my least favorite, so that's not always an automatic factor. But yeah, I gotta say, I love the Zurna when it's kind of sprinkled in throughout this album, but having it as the main carrying element of the song is a little much for me. I think it's really cool and unique sounding, but it's a little too shrill, I feel like, to be kind of the main melody of the album. It gets a little grating on the ears after a bit, so yeah, not my favorite. And, as the album's coming to a close with this track, this is where I'm kind of losing my focus on it a bit and not, like, super grooving with it anymore. Like, after Nuclear Fusion, I'm like starting to check out a little bit, honestly.
Totally fair. Okay, next it's time to talk about most of what we like.
Most of what we like.
Okay, so this is the end of show segment we like to do where we talk about other things we're enjoying at the time. It could be other music, other forms of media, but just in general, stuff we're digging outside of the world of Gizz. So as for me, lately, I don't have anything really new that I've been discovering, but I've been revisiting some older music that I used to be really into when I was younger. Specifically, most recently, the band Avenged Sevenfold. They were one of the first modern metal bands I was introduced to when first exploring heavier music in like late middle school, early high school. In fact, I was actually introduced to them through that same friend that I told the Anoxia story about earlier, so shout out to Greg. And I've also been revisiting System of a Down a lot lately too, and funny enough, I brought them up briefly earlier in this episode as well, so they've just been on my mind a lot at the moment, but they've always been a special band to me. They are one of my favorite bands to crank up in my ears at the gym especially, and get out all my political rage and whatnot. They are the best for that. So with that said, I highly encourage everyone to go back to an old favorite band of yours that maybe you haven't spent a lot of time with recently, and revisit some old favorites of yours for some nostalgic comfort. I've been enjoying it a lot.
Political rage. Why? I can't imagine why you would. Just kidding. I know the answer to that question. I'm right there with you, obviously. Okay, so the 2 items I want to bring to the table today for most of what we like, I discovered a pretty new band here called The Band Feel. That's the band's name, those 3 words, The Band Feel. They only have 1 EP out so far, but it's a 6-track banger. It's a really kind of 70s hard rock, Zeppelin-esque band. They have a really cool sound, and they don't sound like a Zeppelin clone necessarily, but there's some similarity in guitar tone and some other elements. The vocalist does have very much his own style. He's not just a Robert Plant ripoff, but I'm really enjoying them. I discovered them through my Instagram algorithm the other day during a break from work, so highly recommend you check them out. And I also just want to give a plug to an old sentimental favorite, the very first podcast I started listening to, and my favorite podcast of all time, Dynamic Banter. It's co-hosted by Steve Zaragoza and Mike Falzone, a couple of longtime YouTube comedians and content creators. They just put together one wacky-ass show after another, week after week. It's a lot of just absurdist humor, goofy sounds off the soundboard. They talk about any and everything under the sun. It never gets very serious. They always brighten up my days, especially this time of year when the days are getting shorter here as we've gone into sort of the late fall, early winter period. So highly recommend you check them out if you like comedy podcasts, Dynamic Banter.
Okay, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Podagon Infinity. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And also, if this was your first time listening, thanks for sticking it out to the end. We hope you enjoyed your time with us today. Of course, as always, we encourage you to please follow us on all our social media pages. We are at Podagon Infinity everywhere, especially Instagram. We have our most engagement there. We're always posted on the stories and whatnot. So you'll see some more stuff there than you would on some of the other platforms. But either way, follow along with us and stick around. We'd love to have you here.
Yeah, I see we've had a couple of new followers recently, so we thank you for hopping aboard, and we hope you're liking what we're putting out there. So, Joe, as far as our next episode, you want to give the listeners a little look at what they can expect next?
Yeah, so since we kind of covered a couple older albums recently, we like to kind of bounce back and forth a bit. So for the sake of some change in the discussion topic, we are going to talk about 2022's Changes next time. Yeah, another album from another year where they released a shitload of music. So we're going to jump into the future, talk about Changes, a lot of cool, really weird, unique stuff going on with that one too. I'm really excited to revisit that and talk all about it. So we sure hope you will be here with us for that one.
Yeah, excited for that one, and glad we had such a fun time today talking flying microtonal banana. Joe, it has been a blast.
A nuclear blast, if I dare say. Yes,
Hey.
So much fun. So yeah, that's going to be it. So until next time, my name is Joe.
My name is Spencer.
See you later, Gators. Woo!
And gives way to track number fuck.
Five.
What track was it?
Number fuck.
7, 6. Number 6.
It's not number fuck, Spencer. It's number 5.
Whoops.
Or I knew 6. I'm wrong too. It's number 6. There's our end of
So
episode.
Billabong Valley.
Number fuck.
Yes, I was just thinking that. 1, 2, 3, fuck. That's my tribute to Paul McCartney there.